was in the womb. Is God a murderer? I don't think so. A1E. Here's a kicker. Christ would not be able to stay sinless if his soul was in the womb. Think about it. I don't know how much you know about the biology of pregnancy, but every single emotion a woman has passes to the fetus. Every thought she has passes through the placenta to the fetus. Okay? And therefore, if she's happy, the fetus jumps. If she's upset, the fetus cringes. Okay, so then Christ would be controlled by Mary's volition? Because the second thing is that the human brain doesn't develop until just before birth. It can't. Because the skeletal cavity, the cranium, can't be hardened until after the fetus exits the womb, because in order to get through the birth canal, which is pretty much smaller than the head, the cranium has to be soft. Well, then the brain can't be protected. So the brain isn't really fully formed until just about before birth or at birth. I mean, you can talk to a doctor about that, and some of them will tell you that the skeletal outside isn't really hard until maybe up to a year after the baby's born. So what would that mean about Christ then? So if Mary's sinning, and she said she was a sinner in the Magnificat, I think that's in Luke 1:26. You can look it up. You know, my soul exalts the Lord, and that's where it starts. And she calls herself a sinner. Okay, well, so every time she sinned, it would pass on to Christ. And he wouldn't have any ability, because his brain isn't even fully developed, to resist sin. He wouldn't even know how. Okay? So there'd be no salvation if Christ's soul was in the womb. All right, F. There's no place in the Bible that the Bible calls abortion murder. Now, if abortion is such a seriously horrible thing as the pro-lifers claim, then what, God is remiss not to have special verses on saying that abortion is murder? And in fact, he has one verse we're going to see a little bit later in this video that says abortion is not murder. In fact, it's not even a civil case. The woman and the husband decide what to do in the case of a miscarriage caused by someone else. Oops. Now, on top of that, there haven't been any civil laws calling abortion murder until the last 50 years or so. So what was it? With all the prior generations who knew something about Bible, who didn't make it a law like we're trying to do today? Well, are they all unable to read their Bibles for thousands of years? I mean, the Jews never made it a law either. So what? You know, we've got, 6,000 years of people since the fall who had at least some version of the Word, and none of them made a law calling abortion murder? That you had to put a law in the civil book saying it was murder? That's kind of weird, don't you think? So who's wrong? The pro-lifers? Or all those people prior who didn't do what the pro-lifers are doing? Who also believed in Bible, whether they were Jewish, Christian? Huh? Now, here's another kicker. That was A1F, about how the Bible doesn't call abortion murder and there have been no laws on the books. Okay, now here's A1G. Okay, so if it's true that you're not human until you're born, then the mother who's pregnant, where you have to choose between the fetus and her, who lives, if you choose in favor of the fetus, then you really are murdering the mother. Because the mother has a soul. She's alive. She's breathing. She's outside the womb. So if we got this doctrine wrong, and this is especially true for husbands, and that the husband is usually given the choice, okay, your wife, it's either I save your wife or I save your unborn kid. Pick. Now, the husband better pick the wife. Otherwise, he's committing murder. So it's a pretty big decision to make. Now, let's just get into, now we've done, those are just, just a few concepts to mull over and say, well, there's some sense here. That's before you even look at the Bible. Okay, well, before you even look at the fact that the Bible is mistranslated, let's look at the ones that aren't wrong in translation, because they're big clues too. Genesis 1:26 and 27. God decrees to make man in his own image. Okay, God is not a body. God is an immaterial nature called a spirit. Man has a soul. That's an immaterial nature too. Okay, we just talked about some reasons why it would not be a really good idea to put an immaterial nature inside a womb. Okay, but it can go inside a body as a house once the body is outside the womb. Okay, but your humanity is actually immaterial in nature. This is just the house. And I'm going to go through the Bible verses that say that when I go do the videos, because there are a whole bunch of them. But Genesis 1:26 and 27 tips you off right now. Oh, God is spirit. If I'm made in God's image, then what makes me human is not my body. Duh. Okay. But how about Genesis 2:7? The way God makes you. What does he do with Adam? He first forms. We saw that in the Genesis videos. It was in the Genesis videos episodes 6c through the end of 7. Now, I show it from the Hebrew, but I mean, you can even read it in English. The order in which God makes Adam human. First, he does all this forming with, Adam means earth and Adam means man, so the earth man made out of earth. Okay. But he first forms a body. It's not alive at that point. It's not alive until God breathes, and in the Hebrew it's plural, lives into Adam. I'm going to go through the plural Hebrew of lives in the videos, and I show you how it's used elsewhere in the Bible. So even though the English mistranslates Genesis 2:7 as saying living rather than lives, it's still second after the body is formed and God breathed into Adam's nostrils. Okay? Now, the nostrils of the baby in the womb are plugged. They don't get cleared until the baby is born. We call it a baby before it's born because we want it to become a baby. But technically, it's not a baby. It's not breathing. God breathes lives into, and what's the first thing that they do in a hospital? They clear the nostrils, and then the baby exhales and usually cries. Well, that's the pattern of Adam. So it's not alive until God breathes the soul into it, and the verse is very specific, and even in translation you can see that. So the body parts are not alive until God breathes lives into it, which he does after he formed the body. Big hint. Okay, how about Genesis 25:22? There, Rebecca asks God what the heck is going on because she's having a really bad pregnancy. They waited 20 years. Isaac and her didn't have any kids. She seemed to be sterile. And now that she finally gets pregnant, it's like, is this what this is about? I waited all this time? Because like 20 years. And she went to God about the pregnancy. Ooh, big hint about what we ought to do. She went to God, not Caesar. She didn't go to the king of the country where they lived and said, well, am I allowed to have an abortion? Or am I forced to have a kid? No, she went to God, who gives life. Big hint. Now here's the kicker. That was an item 2. Genesis 1:26 and 27 is an item 2A. Genesis 2:7 is an item 2B in the Word doc. Genesis 25:22 is an item 2C of the Word doc. And now we come to the really big one. I mean, I'm going to tell you which ones. Exodus 21:22. There is a straw man court case about a woman who miscarries, basically ends up aborting her fetus, because she gets involved in a fight between two men, one of which is her husband, trying to break it up. And the issue was, well, what happens if she miscarries due to getting involved in the fight? Who's responsible? What are the damages? Is it a criminal thing? And Exodus 21:22 versus Exodus 21:23 makes this distinction. If it's solely a miscarriage, then the woman and her husband decide what to do about it. They call the shots, not the courts, not Caesar. Get it? But in verse 23, if the woman herself is harmed, then it's the eye for eye, tooth for tooth doctrine, which means it's a criminal matter. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth is the Bible's rhetorical style for saying it's criminal. All right? Check it out yourself. Now, not every Bible translates that verse properly, okay? This is very ironic because the ones that do translate it properly, you wouldn't expect that they'd get it right. Here are the ones that translate it properly. The NIV and the NIB. Now, not all hardbacks of the NIV get it right, but